We now come to usage messages. So what is a usage message? Well, the great majority of Unix commands, like ls and grep and so on, have what we call a usage message, which is simply a couple of lines of text that are displayed if the user incorrectly specifies command line parameters. In other words, if the particular command requires, say, 3 parameters and you only type in 2, then you might get back a usage message. Or if it requires exactly 1 parameter and you specify 4, again you would get a usage message. Or even if it requires a collection of options like a -p, a -j and a -k option, and you give it a -u option, again you would get a usage message. That's what they're for, and it's a good idea that all Unix programs have them. It just makes for consistency, it makes it easy for a user to quickly determine what parameters should be specified to any given command. And that includes, of course, shell scripts. So let's have a look at an example. This is the one from grep. I've just copied it exactly. Grep must be followed by some optional options. Notice that the brackets specify that a command line parameter is in fact optional. So we can have some options like the -l option or the -s option. And we can have a few of those. Then we must specify a pattern, and then we can specify 1 or 0 or more file names. File names are optional, we don't have to specify them, and if we do, we can actually specify several. So if you're about to create a script that will be used for quite some time in the future, or if you plan to release it to all of the users on your system, then you probably should create a usage message for it. And you might write code that looks something like this. If the number of parameters is less than 2, so let's assume that this particular shell script requires 2 or more parameters, then echo out usage : and then the name of your script followed by the actual 2 parameters that are mandatory, which might be a username followed by a file name. Now I've put ... there, meaning I guess that should be interpreted to mean that we can actually specify several file names. And then of course you exit the program, because there is no way to continue because the user did not specify the correct options on the command line. I've exited with the exit status of 2 there, just simply to differentiate it from any other termination condition. For example, if the program ran and it couldn't find one of those file names, then it might exit with an exit status of 1. So this is just a helpful way of saying, well, this is a different kind of error. This is an actual usage error. It doesn't have to be 2, it can be anything you like. It can even be the same. You don't even have to specify an exit status at all, but it's just handy to give your users that option. And also note that it's a good idea for this usage message to go to standard error. It is, of course, an error message, so you can do that by appending a 1 greater than &2 to the end of the echo statement. And what that means is that standard output should go to the same place as standard error is going. So that's almost it for the usage message. It's not very tricky, but there's a couple of other things that will make your usage message a lot more flexible and perhaps even more user-friendly. So let's have a look at those now. Let's imagine that we have a script called MyScript, and that it's a really useful script. It's living in some bin directory somewhere, but somebody has copied it to another location and given it a different name. So it might have been MyScript in the original place, but the second version of it might be called backup script or something like that. It could even actually be linked using a hard link, or even, I guess, even a symbolic link. So the actual same file name could have 2 different names. We could have a single script that is given 2 different names in the file system. So what are we going to do with our usage message, which actually refers to the name of the script itself? Can we still just have the word MyScript as part of the usage message? Because recall that it may not be called MyScript anymore. When we don't really want everybody who copies the script to another location, or give it a different name, to have to actually edit the script and find where we've called it MyScript and rename it to their particular name. There is in fact a much nicer solution. There is a special variable called $0, just like $1, $2, $3, and all the way up to $9, this is actually $0, which is, if you think about it, the bit of the command line that comes before all the parameters. In other words, it's the name of the script, just as they typed it in on the command line, which of course in this case would be my script. So that makes it very easy for us. We can just simply replace the name of the script in the usage message with $0, giving us something like the following. Now we know that's nice and flexible now, so no matter what they call this particular file name, or no matter how many links it has, whenever they run it, the usage message will be accurate. So that's very nice. There's just a couple of things to be aware of there. $0 cannot be shifted. So you can shift things as much as you like, and the only thing that's going to change is $1 up to $9. $0 is not affected by a shift action. And it's also interesting to keep in mind that the user can often see a usage message. If you use the $0 option just like this, you can end up with usage messages that look like the following. Usage /user/local/bin/myscript, and then the rest of the usage message. Now that's probably quite accurate. If that happened to be the way they called it, they may have actually typed that in on the command line. But it doesn't make for a very user-friendly usage message. So what we tend to do is we use something called base name, which trims out everything except the very last part of the file name. In fact, it trims out all the path information. So you would end up with just, for example, my script, if we were looking at the following example. And the /user/local/bin/ would get trimmed out. So that last line that you can see there on this slide is a fairly generic usage message. It's got the 1 greater than &2 on the end. It's got the base name $0 inside backwards quotes in the middle, which is probably the best way that you can specify the name of the script. The only thing about it that's non-generic is the actual parameters themselves, username, file name, ... And of course they can be changed for each script. So you could just copy and paste this line from one script to the next and use it as your general purpose usage message. Okay, so that's pretty much all I want to say about that. Let's get on now and do the exercises. So here are the exercises for Chapter 9. There's 2 of them. The first one is I actually want you to write a reusable function called usage. When I say reusable, I mean this function should be able to be used with any shell script regardless of the actual parameters that script takes. So the function should take at least one parameter, which is the name of the script. I guess you could get that from $0. And it should do the following. It should echo that script name plus any other given parameters that you specified out to standard error. It should actually beep, make a little ping noise using the Control-G character. I don't know if you remember how to do that, but it's pretty much just putting a Control-G into the echo statement. It should also echo with an exit status of 2, and we should ensure that base name is used to trim out the path information from the script name. And this is how you might call this particular usage function. It's a function recall, not a script. You might say usage and then $0, which would be obviously the script name, complete with path information if there was any specified, and then the parameters that the script should have, which would be a username and a file name, and then the ... to signify that there might be actually more than one file name required. So the usage function will actually take, in this particular example, exactly 4 parameters. The $0, username, file name, and then ... will be the 4th parameter. Like I said, it doesn't have to take 4 parameters because the usage will be different for each script that it's actually used in. Now what you could do then is you could add this usage function that you've written, this generic reusable function, to a function library, and you could call it from anywhere, from any script that you write, so you'd never have to write a usage function ever again. So that's the first exercise. And the second exercise is relating to the course project. Modify it so that it actually requires one command line parameter, which will be the name of the data file. Now this command line parameter will be not optional. They have to specify it on the command line of our script. Now obviously we need to modify the script in a few ways. I'd like you to use this new usage function that you just wrote in the last exercise to display the usage message if the user does not specify the file name parameter. And I don't mind whether you copy and paste the code from the usage function into your course project, or whether you use the dot operator to include your function library that contains the usage function. Now, if they specify a file and the file exists, you must check that you can write to the file. If you can't write to the file, then obviously the database isn't going to be able to do its job, so we exit the program with the appropriate error message. If they specify a file and the file does not exist, ask them if they want to create the file. And if they say no, well, there's nothing we can do really, because they don't want to create a file, so we must exit. Now, if they say that we can create the file, then create it, of course, and then check that you were able to create it, because obviously whatever you did to create the file may have failed, and if it failed, obviously you'd have to exit at that point. So the only way that we'd actually make it through to the rest of the bulk of the program is either if the file exists and it's writable, or the file does not exist and we were successfully able to create it. Okay, so there's a little bit of work for you to do there. It's all good practice. These sort of techniques are very common. So good luck, and I'll see you in the next module where I'll show you my answer.